Xylox knew he was committing academic fraud. But what were the odds anyone would ever find out? In the grand halls of the Zathorian Institute of Advanced Sciences, plagiarism wasn't just frowned upon, it was a career-ending offense. But Xylox wasn't worried. Not even a little. After all, he wasn't stealing from another Zathorian. He wasn't even stealing from a recognized species within the galactic academic network. No, his source was far more obscure, far less respected. He was stealing from humans. To most of the interstellar community, Earth was a strange anomaly, a death world species with impressive survival instincts but woefully outdated methodologies. They were an upstart civilization, barely climbing into the galactic scene, still toying with crude fusion reactors while the rest of the cosmos had moved on to quantum harmonics. Their advancements were sporadic, fueled more by war and desperation than by structured progress. That was precisely why Xylox had chosen them. No one would look twice at Earth's scientific archives. No one would care. And if some long-forgotten human scientist had stumbled upon useful equations, what did it matter? He had discovered a trove of valuable research hidden within their outdated, decentralized academic networks, mathematical models, engineering solutions, even a few radical physics theories that hadn't been published in any intergalactic database. All he had to do was refine their work, strip away the primitive presentation, and submit it as his own. By the time he graduated, his name would be listed among the greatest minds of Zathor. Xylox leaned back in his hoverchair, mandibles clicking in satisfaction as he examined his research tablet. He had compiled an elegant paper, a revolutionary theory on interdimensional resonance, built on obscure human data but enhanced with sleek, modern Zathorian refinements. The perfect crime. He tapped through the files one last time, making sure everything looked properly formatted for submission. But then, something strange caught his eye. A set of equations, buried deep in the research. It wasn't the numbers themselves that unsettled him. It was their presentation. They weren't formatted in any recognized AI script. No digital signatures from computational neural networks. No predictive models generated by quantum processing cores. The equations were handwritten. Xylox frowned, zooming in on the file. The symbols were slightly uneven, ink-stained at the edges, as if they had been scrawled hastily by a crude, biological hand. There were corrections in the margins, notes added in what appeared to be actual handwriting rather than digital overlays. He cross-referenced the file, searching for metadata that might indicate an error in the formatting. Maybe it had been scanned from an ancient manuscript? Or preserved for historical reasons? But the timestamp suggested otherwise. This wasn't an ancient relic. The work was recent. And it had been done by hand. His throat tightened. That couldn't be right. No advanced civilization worked like this. Even primitive species relied on rudimentary AI for complex computations. Handwritten equations belonged to a bygone era, something a species abandoned once they reached even the most basic computational thresholds. And yet, these calculations were absurdly complex. More complex than anything even his own AI-assisted models had produced. Xylox's mandibles twitched in disbelief. If these numbers were correct, then some human, some solitary, AI-deprived primitive had sat down and manually derived breakthrough-level physics without any digital assistance. That was impossible. He stared at the file, his confidence unraveling. Had he misunderstood the nature of human intelligence? Had their supposed primitivism masked something far more terrifying? For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. He had assumed he was exploiting human ignorance. But what if, instead, he had just stumbled onto something no Zathorian truly understood? His research paper, once a surefire success, now felt like a dangerous gamble. And somewhere deep in his gut, Xylox realized he wasn't the one studying humanity. Humanity was studying him. Xylox had always believed himself to be rational, logical, a scholar above the petty superstitions of lesser species. But as he stared at the handwritten human calculations, he felt something disturbingly unfamiliar. Doubt. It wasn't just the sheer complexity of the formulas. Any sufficiently advanced civilization could generate complicated equations. No, what unsettled him was the method. The raw, organic messiness of it all. Smudged ink. Crossed out figures. Rewritten variables. It was an absolute disaster by Zathorian standards. And yet, as he analyzed the numbers, he couldn't deny the horrifying truth: the math was correct. He forced himself to remain calm, retracting his mandibles as he reclined in his hoverchair. Perhaps there was a rational explanation. Some odd human tradition, a ceremonial gesture mimicking real work. Surely, they hadn't actually done all these calculations manually? His fingers trembled as he tapped his research tablet, running the equations through his own AI models. The response came almost instantly. Verified. Error rate, 0.00004%. That was lower than the standard output of most mid-tier quantum processing units. Zylock swallowed hard. His mind raced through the implications. Who does this? Who in their right mind wastes time on something an AI could do in a fraction of a second? His own species had abandoned manual calculation millennia ago, long before they had even reached interstellar civilization. Every known race in the galactic academic network relied on AI-assisted computation. It was the natural progression of intelligence: develop tools, enhance them, and delegate complexity to machines. But humans had done the opposite. They embraced inefficiency. They thrived in it. Zylox pulled up the author of the research paper, his anxiety rising. Dr. Evelyn Carter. A simple name. No prestigious titles, no recorded AI affiliations. Just a single human researcher, working at a modest Earth institution called MIT, a place with no direct connection to the galactic academic network. He needed to know more. Quickly, he navigated to the Interstellar Academic Exchange Program, scrolling through a list of human researchers available for correspondence. His breath hitched when he saw the name appear on the list. Dr. Evelyn Carter, open for academic discussions. This was a risk. Contacting a human directly meant exposure, scrutiny. If she realized how little he actually knew about her methods, the entire foundation of his research could be questioned. But Zylox had no choice. He composed a message, keeping it simple and professional. Greetings, Dr. Carter. I am Zylox, a graduate researcher from the Zathorian Institute of Advanced Sciences. I recently encountered your work on interdimensional resonance and found it quite fascinating. I would appreciate any insight you could provide on your methodology. Specifically, the derivation of your equations. I look forward to your response. He hesitated before sending. Should he phrase it differently? Should he acknowledge the handwritten aspect of her work? No. That would raise too many questions. Taking a deep breath, he hit send. Now, all he could do was wait a response from Earth. It didn't take long. Barely an hour had passed before a notification flashed across his screen. Incoming message from Dr. Evelyn Carter. Zylox's breath hitched. That was fast. Most high-profile researchers took days, if not weeks, to respond. Was this normal for humans? He opened the message. Hello, Zylox. I'm always excited to discuss my work. I'm actually a little surprised a Zathorian researcher found it interesting. Most alien academics overlook human models since we don't use AI for our calculations. But I suppose that's why you're reaching out, isn't it? You want to know why I did it by hand, ***. Zylox's mandibles twitched. She had seen through him instantly. He read on. I could have used an AI to solve these equations. In fact, I ran simulations alongside my manual work just to confirm my results. But AI doesn't think, it follows patterns, and sometimes those patterns limit discovery. When I work by hand, I see the problem from angles no machine ever could. And that's where true innovation happens. Zylox felt a cold dread settle over him. Humans weren't just solving problems, they were outthinking machines. He clenched his jaw, rereading the message. This wasn't just some eccentricity. This was a fundamental difference in cognition, something no other species in the galaxy had considered. For centuries, the Zathorian academic elite had believed intelligence was measured by a species' reliance on computation. AI was seen as the peak of knowledge acquisition, the ultimate tool to advance civilization. But what if they had been wrong? What if, by outsourcing thought to machines, they had weakened their own intellectual evolution? The realization made his skin crawl. And worse, he was about to present a research paper built on human methods he didn't even understand. If his professor pressed him on the derivations, if anyone asked how he had reached his conclusions, he would have no answer. He had assumed he was exploiting human ignorance. But now, he feared he had just exposed his own. For the first time in his academic career, Xylox wasn't afraid of getting caught. He was afraid of what he was about to learn. Xylox couldn't sleep. The glowing screens of his research tablet reflected in his dark eyes as he read Dr. Carter's message for the 10th time. He kept expecting to find a flaw, a misinterpretation, anything that would explain away the impossible claim. But no matter how many times he scrutinized the words, the meaning remained unchanged. When I work by hand, I see the problem from angles no machine ever could. He wanted to dismiss it as human arrogance, a simple-minded species clinging to outdated traditions. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans were solving problems in ways that defied conventional logic. And worse, they were succeeding. The weight of his own deception pressed down on him. He had taken their work, stripped it of its primitive presentation, and repackaged it for Zathorian academia. He hadn't questioned the validity of the findings because, in his mind, no primitive species could possibly have outthought the Zathorian scientific elite. But now, his confidence was unraveling. He needed to understand. With a deep breath, Xylox typed a reply. Your response intrigues me, Dr. Carter. If AI follows patterns, as you say, then does that not make it more efficient? Wouldn't manual calculations introduce human error? He hesitated before sending, worried he might be revealing too much of his own ignorance. But the message went through, and within minutes, another notification flashed across his screen. You're right, humans make mistakes. We aren't as precise as AI. But that's exactly why we succeed. AI avoids mistakes by following perfect logic, but innovation isn't always logical. Some of our greatest discoveries happened because someone made a mistake, saw something unexpected, and followed the wrong path, only to realize it was actually the right one. We don't just solve problems. We explore them. Xylox's fingers tightened around his tablet. This wasn't how knowledge was supposed to work. Science was about precision, about reducing variables and eliminating error. His own species had perfected this philosophy over millennia. Zathorian students were taught from birth to rely on logic, to minimize uncertainty, to remove the chaotic nature of organic thought from academic pursuits. And yet, here was a species that had embraced the chaos, that had thrived in it. It was infuriating. He needed to see it for himself. Switching to his academic exchange portal, he accessed the human research databases directly. His credentials allowed limited access, but it was enough. He sifted through centuries of scientific progress, expecting to find a clear pattern, a progression that aligned with the structured advancements of other civilizations. Instead, what he found was madness. Breakthroughs born from accidents. Equations scribbled on napkins. Theories that had been ridiculed for decades, only to be proven true by sheer persistence. Albert Einstein had developed special relativity with nothing but thought experiments and a notebook. Richard Feynman had visualized quantum mechanics through doodles rather than simulations. Even the modern advancements in interdimensional resonance, Dr. Carter's own field, had started as a rejected proposal before someone manually recalculated the math. Humans didn't just think outside the box. They didn't even acknowledge the box existed. Xylox closed his eyes, exhaling sharply. If this was true, then what did it mean for his own species? For centuries, Zathorians had believed they were the pinnacle of scientific advancement. But if their reliance on AI had made them efficient at solving known problems, while humans had become experts at discovering new ones, then who was truly ahead? His mind was spinning. And then, another thought surfaced, one far more dangerous than the rest. If he had discovered this, then how long before other Zathorian scholars did the same? What would happen when the scientific elite realized that their entire approach to knowledge was flawed? That a so-called primitive species had outpaced them in ways they couldn't even comprehend? Xylox's hands trembled. He had assumed he was committing academic fraud, that he was stealing from a lesser civilization. But now, it felt like he had stumbled upon something forbidden. Something that could shatter the foundations of Zathorian academia itself. He needed to make a choice. Did he bury this knowledge, submit his paper, and continue living the comfortable lie? Or did he follow the path of human insanity and risk everything to learn the truth? His tablet chimed. A new message from Dr. Carter. If you're ever interested in seeing how we do things firsthand, I'd be happy to set up a live session. I think you'd find it fascinating. Xylox stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was dangerous. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt something far stronger than fear. Curiosity. Xylox hesitated before responding to Dr. Carter's message. His entire academic career, his entire civilization's philosophy, was built on the idea that intelligence was measured by efficiency, by precision, by the ability to eliminate uncertainty. And yet, here he was, about to engage in a discussion with a human who claimed that uncertainty was the key to discovery. He exhaled sharply and typed his reply. A live session would be informative. I accept. Within minutes, a response arrived with a time and access link to a human digital exchange platform. Xylox found it strange that they still used such archaic systems. Direct neural interfaces had long since replaced manual data transmissions in most advanced civilizations. But he forced himself to push aside his biases. If he was going to understand the human method, he had to experience it as they did. At the appointed time, the screen flickered to life, and there she was, Dr. Evelyn Carter, sitting in what appeared to be a dimly lit Earth-based office, surrounded by books, loose papers, and a massive whiteboard covered in incomprehensible symbols. She smiled. Xylox, right? I was curious if you'd actually show up. Her voice was warm, confident. Not at all what he had expected from a primitive researcher. I am here, Xylox said, choosing his words carefully. Your methods intrigue me. I wish to understand how you conduct research without AI assistance. Dr. Carter chuckled. You're making it sound like some ancient ritual. She gestured to the mess behind her. It's not as strange as you think. Humans have been working this way for centuries, long before we had computers, let alone artificial intelligence. Xylox's gaze flicked to the whiteboard. Your equations, you write them by hand? Of course, she said. When you work manually, you interact with the problem differently. You don't just solve, it forces you to think at every step. Xylox frowned. But an AI could produce a solution instantaneously. She leaned forward. That's exactly the problem. AI gives you an answer, but it doesn't explore the wrong answers. It doesn't stumble. It doesn't wander. Humans do. And sometimes, wandering leads to discoveries no algorithm would ever consider. Xylox processed her words, trying to grasp the logic. But mistakes are inefficient. You are saying that inefficiency creates progress? Not just progress, Carter said. Breakthroughs. Xylox felt an uncomfortable shift in his thinking. The concept clashed with everything he had been taught. In Zathorian science, the goal was to eliminate variables, to refine and perfect. But humans embraced the chaos. I find this difficult to accept, he admitted. Dr. Carter nodded as if she had expected that. Then let's test it. She turned to her whiteboard and scribbled down an equation, one far more complex than anything he had seen from human academics before. This, she said, is an unsolved problem in interdimensional resonance physics. AI simulations have failed to crack it because the variables are too unpredictable. So, instead of feeding it into a machine, let's try solving it ourselves. Xylox felt his skin tighten. Manually? She grinned. Manually. Xylox hesitated. This was madness. No species in the galactic academic network would attempt such a thing. But if humans had done it before, if their methods had led them to breakthroughs that no AI could predict. He steeled himself. Show me. For the next 2 hours, Xylox watched as Carter worked. She moved rapidly, marking and erasing, adjusting variables, trying and discarding entire sections before circling back to a previous idea. It was erratic. It was inefficient. And yet, it was brilliant. Xylox had never seen someone engage with mathematics like this. AI computations were linear, precise. Carter's approach was fluid, adaptable, an almost artistic dance with numbers. He tried to follow along, but the sheer unpredictability of her methods made it impossible. And yet, she was making progress. His throat tightened. This was what he had been missing. Not just the answers, but the ability to reach the answers in ways no machine could. His mind raced with the implications. If this was how humans operated, if they could achieve breakthroughs that AI-driven species could not, then what else had they discovered that the rest of the galaxy had overlooked? He had spent his life believing that Xythorians were the intellectual pinnacle of the universe. But now, for the first time, he realized something terrifying. They weren't at the top. They were just efficient. And humanity? Humanity was beyond them. His hands clenched into fists as realization dawned. His research paper wasn't just built on stolen ideas, it was built on a misunderstanding of intelligence itself. And if his professors found out, if the Xythorian academic elite realized what humanity was truly capable of, it wouldn't just change science. It would change everything. Xylox stood outside the towering halls of the Xythorian Institute of Advanced Sciences, his research tablet clutched tightly in his trembling hands. The weight of his impending academic review pressed down on him like a collapsing gravity field. He had spent his life preparing for this moment, his chance to prove himself among the most elite scholars in the galaxy. And now, he wasn't sure if he was walking into triumph or disaster. The doors to the tribunal chambers slid open, revealing a semicircular hall where 5 senior professors sat in judgment. They were the pinnacle of Xythorian academia, their minds sharpened by decades of computational perfection. At the center sat Professor Julek, a towering figure in the field of interdimensional physics and one of Xylox's most feared evaluators. Xylox, Julek began, his voice cool and precise. You have submitted a research paper on interdimensional resonance that has captured great interest within the academic community. Your findings are unconventional. The other professors murmured in agreement. Xylox swallowed hard, his mandibles clicking involuntarily. Before we proceed, Julek continued, we have a simple question. How did you derive these equations? The question struck like a plasma shot to the chest. Xylox knew this was coming. He had rehearsed a dozen plausible explanations, but standing here, in front of the highest academic minds of his species, his confidence wavered. A pause. A fraction of a second too long. Julek's eyes narrowed. We cross-referenced your calculations, one of the other professors added. There is no record of them being produced by any known computational system. No AI assistance. No digital signatures. Your methodology is unclear. Xylox's throat went dry. He could lie. Claim a system glitch, an unregistered algorithm, anything to mask the truth. But the truth had already changed him. The moment he had witnessed Dr. Carter's process, the moment he had seen how humans approached problems, he had realized that the Xythorian way, his way, was fundamentally flawed. They were efficient. But they were blind to what lay outside efficiency. His mind raced. If he told them the truth, would they listen? Would they even comprehend it? Professor Julek leaned forward, his gaze drilling into him. Xylox, we expect an answer. A deep breath. A decision. I did not derive them, Xylox admitted. They are based on human research. The chamber fell silent. Then, laughter. Not amusement, but disbelief. You mean to say, one of the professors scoffed, that these calculations, which surpass some of our most advanced models, came from humans? Zylox stood his ground. Yes. Julek's expression darkened. Plagiarism, then. You stole their work. Zylox hesitated. That had been his intention, yes. But now, he saw the truth. What he had stolen wasn't just human knowledge. It was understanding that no other species in the galaxy had yet grasped. It is more than that, Zylox said, his voice steady. Human cognitive methods are unlike anything we have ever studied. Their reliance on manual calculations, their unpredictable problem-solving, it isn't primitive. It is a form of intelligence that no AI can replicate. Silence. The professors exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. That is an extraordinary claim, Julek said. And you base it on what? That humans refuse to use AI? No, Zylox replied. I base it on results. They think differently. They make breakthroughs not because they are faster, but because they are unbound by the constraints of computational logic. I have seen it firsthand. Julek's mandibles twitched in irritation. You are suggesting that humans, one of the most recent additions to the galactic academic network, possess a superior method of discovery? Yes. Zylox met his gaze head-on. And we have been blind to it. The room was deathly still. Then, one of the professors scoffed. This is absurd. Humans lack the processing capabilities of our AI. They are chaotic, inefficient, and reckless. You are mistaking luck for intelligence. Zylox's heart pounded. He had known they would resist. He had hoped they would at least consider the possibility. But the Zathorian mind had been trained for generations to trust in efficiency, to equate precision with superiority. To them, what humans did was not science, it was madness. And yet, he saw doubt flicker in Julek's eyes. A tiny crack in the fortress of absolute certainty. Do you have proof? Julek finally asked. Zylox hesitated. He had no AI models, no predictive simulations. All he had was a live session with a human scientist, an experience that had fundamentally shifted his understanding of intelligence itself. And then, an idea struck him. I do, he said. But it is not a file or a dataset. It is an experience. If you truly wish to see what I have seen, then speak to a human scientist yourself. Julek's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. And you believe they will be willing to demonstrate this supposed cognitive superiority? Zylox exhaled. I don't just believe it. I know it. The tribunal sat in silent deliberation. He knew they would not accept this easily. But if even one of them entertained the thought, if even one of them agreed to see the truth for themselves, then everything would change. Finally, Julek spoke. Very well, Zylox. Arrange this meeting. We shall see if these humans are as exceptional as you claim. Zylox's pulse quickened. This was his moment. If the Zathorian elite witnessed human ingenuity firsthand, they would have no choice but to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about intelligence. But deep inside, a gnawing fear took hold. What if they did see it? And what if they decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to keep their secrets? Zylox had never felt this kind of pressure before. His entire academic career, his entire species' perception of intelligence, rested on what was about to happen. The Zathorian tribunal had agreed to a live demonstration. Not just any demonstration, but a direct intellectual exchange between the finest minds of Zathor and a single human scientist, Dr. Evelyn Carter. If she failed, Zylox would be ruined. Worse, humanity's entire academic credibility could be dismissed forever. The connection was established. The screen flickered to life, revealing Carter once again, her office cluttered as always, the whiteboard behind her already half-filled with equations. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look like someone about to face the most powerful academic institution in the galaxy. She just looked curious. Dr. Carter, Julek greeted her, his tone neutral but laced with skepticism. I am Professor Julek of the Zathorian Institute of Advanced Sciences. We have been informed that your species engages in unconventional scientific methods. Carter tilted her head, amused. Unconventional? Julek's mandibles twitched. Manual calculation. A lack of reliance on artificial intelligence. The use of intuition in scientific reasoning. These methods contradict all known principles of efficiency-based intelligence. Carter leaned forward. Efficiency and intelligence aren't the same thing, Professor. The tribunal exchanged glances. Xylox held his breath. Carter was doing what humans did best, challenging assumptions without hesitation. Explain, Julek said. Carter picked up a marker and turned to her board. Let me ask you something, Professor. Suppose an AI runs 100 million simulations to optimize an interdimensional resonance equation. It finds the most efficient solution in a matter of seconds. That sounds superior, right? Julek nodded. Of course. That is the foundation of advanced computation. Now suppose a human scientist runs one equation, Carter continued, sketching a rough diagram. Not by brute force, but by insight. They recognize a pattern, make an intuitive leap, and solve the same problem, not in 100 million attempts, but in one. Julek's expression darkened. That is improbable. But not impossible, Carter countered. It happens all the time in human science. That's why we still work manually. Because sometimes, intuition finds solutions that an AI never would. Silence. The tribunal members shifted uncomfortably. Xylox saw the conflict on Julek's face. A lifetime of certainty crashing against an argument he couldn't immediately refute. You claim intuition is superior to computational perfection, another professor challenged. Not superior, Carter said. Just different. AI solves known problems faster. Humans discover new problems. That's the difference. Xylox saw it now, the exact thing that had shaken him to his core when he first realized what humanity was capable of. Xathorians optimized. Humans explored. Julek exhaled slowly. And you believe this method has allowed humans to surpass known scientific models? Carter smiled. Professor, we aren't just discussing theory. I can prove it. Right now. She erased a section of her whiteboard and wrote out an equation, one that Xylox instantly recognized. It was the unsolved interdimensional resonance problem, the one that had eluded even Xathorian AI models. A murmur passed through the tribunal. You are suggesting that you can solve this problem manually? Julek asked. Carter shrugged. I'm saying that we've been working on it without AI, yes. But let's make it interesting. She underlined part of the equation and looked directly at Julek. Pick a variable. Any variable. Change it, introduce a complication, anything you want. Julek hesitated, then leaned forward. Very well. He input a random modifier, adjusting one of the key constants in the problem. The equation should have become exponentially harder to solve. Carter barely blinked. Got it. Give me a few minutes. Xylox watched in astonishment as Carter dived into her work. No AI, no quantum computing, just a marker, a whiteboard, and a human mind. She scribbled furiously, erasing sections, rewriting them, muttering to herself. It was the same method Xylox had seen before, the chaotic madness of human thought. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. And then, she stopped. Okay, Carter said, capping her marker. I think I got something. She stepped aside, revealing the final equation. It was elegant, refined, an intuitive leap where logic had failed. Xylox's breath caught in his throat. It was correct. Julek ran the numbers through his own AI assistant, verifying every step. The result came back with a 99.9999% accuracy rating. The tribunal was stunned. You solved it, one of the professors whispered. Carter grinned. I thought my way through it. Xylox saw the shift happen in real time. The moment when centuries of academic certainty fractured before the undeniable proof of human ingenuity. Julek sat back, studying Carter as if seeing her for the first time. I must reconsider certain assumptions, he admitted. Xylox knew what that meant. This was no longer about a research paper. This was a paradigm shift. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. Their methods had been dismissed, their intelligence seen as primitive. But now, the truth was out. They weren't just another species in the academic hierarchy. They were something else entirely. And as Xylox left the tribunal chamber that day, he realized that he had just witnessed the beginning of a scientific revolution. Because now, the Zathorian elite knew. And they would never look at humans the same way again.